Hello Wargamers, it's January the 31st, 2017 and I am finally playing my very first game of Advanced Squad Leader using the Advanced Squad Leader Starter Kit number 1. I'm actually playing scenario number 2, War of the Rats, which is set in Stalingrad and has the Russians defending against the attacking Germans. And I'll cut straight to it. We are at the moment, here's our scenario card. So far the Russians set up, the Germans have played 2 turns, the Russians have played 1, and we are now at the beginning of the Russian second turn. These are Russian reinforcements which have not appeared on the map yet. They will come on from the south edge, which is this edge down here. So they will come on from the south edge, go that way. The victory conditions are that the Germans have to control this building here, also this building here, and this building here. The Russian defense, the Russian initial defense was, as seems to be common with me, was based on the fact that they did not put themselves in forward positions, even though there were stone buildings, forward positions where they could shoot at the Germans as they advanced upon them, because they would have been killed if they had been in such positions. The Russians had to set up south of the line that I'm indicating right now, which went all the way up here and then across here, so basically south of that road line. So the Russians started out here, they started out in this building here and this building here, but back from the front so that they couldn't be shot at by the Germans, because the Germans are able, especially as I've done over here with the Germans, in this case here and here, they are able to create such potent kill stacks that any Russians that could be hit by them would just be flat out destroyed by prep fire. So the Russians had to hold back. So they've had to hold back, keep their powder dry, and hope that when the reinforcements show up, which they will hopefully show up shortly, they might be able to, for example, Russian reinforcements could show up around here and very quickly, perhaps in one turn, get into a building and get involved in the fighting. Over here, what happened is that the German commander wisely, one would think, decided that the thing to do to attack these Russians here was he had 3 squads. He wanted to move into this building, and this building at the same time, so that the Russians would not be able to concentrate all their firepower on one big stack. The problem with this is that, as is clear, there's open ground here and there's open ground there. The Russians did fire and caused a certain degree of grief amongst the Germans. The Germans, a squad and a leader, have fled back to this building here to rally, which I believe they have now. Well, I think we can see that one of the squad is still broken, but the leader has rallied. So that Russian stack there is given a good account of itself. Over here, this Russian stack has just basically sort of been creeping further and further south so as not to get itself killed. The Germans advanced to that point in the last turn, so now the Russians can open up with a prep fire. Not that great of a prep fire, but they could do that, or they could continue to flee, although that would be very difficult because the half-hexes are not playable in this scenario, those half-hexes. So it looks like they're in a tough spot. And then finally over here, interesting stuff happened. They have been kept as a reserve down here, but these chaps here, which actually have no leader with them, but it's 3 squads and a medium machine gun, they had the Germans, both these German stacks came up to point-blank range to get in and finally close with them. There are no special weapons here, it's just rather a potent kill stack plus a couple more squads over here. And they gave a good count of themselves. The Germans moved to here in their movement phase, and then in defensive fire phase, they were able to break a few of them, which meant that in the German advance phase, the Germans then retreated back to this hex so they could keep themselves as a force in being, rather than being a depleted force here with half their number having broken up here. This stack here is really the killer stack because it has a flamethrower and 2 demo charges in it as well. So it's not looking very good for this stack here. The Russian reinforcements will show up when a dice roll is rolled that is lower than the current turn number. So it's now turn 2, so it's the first opportunity the Russians have had to roll a dice. If they get a 1, then that means their reinforcements will show up. And of course, as the game goes on, it'll be more likely that their reinforcements will show up as this game lasts 6 turns. So we'll see what happens, and it's been very interesting. No major problems. A heck of a lot more goes on in the defensive fire phase than ever used to go on in Squad Leader, but at least you haven't got that awful thing in Squad Leader where you have to keep track of where everybody moved and then move them back to that location at the end of the movement phase in order to conduct defensive fire. One other thing, the current losses. Here are the current losses. It's a little bit deceptive because what's actually happened here is that this unit here had to be taken off so that it could be step reduced to a unit half the size of that. And these 2 units here, these 2 light machine guns, broke and then failed to repair, so the Russians lost those 2. Right, I'll stop now and press on. Okay, so it's the same game, and it's the beginning of the German 4th turn. The Russian reinforcements have not appeared yet. Down here, the Germans are making slow progress. They did finally get into position where the Russian was here, and they were all in nice cozy stone buildings around, ready to be able to fire on him or make a close combat attack. But instead of staying in the middle of all that, what he did was he simply moved away, so that if they try to pull that sort of thing again, at least they won't all be in stone buildings. So if they, for example, went here, here and here, 2 of them would be in the open. They moved down to here. They were fired on to some extent. You have some unusual buildings on this board where, for example, that unit can fire at that unit there because there's no building in the middle there. The hex line goes outside. Fired on them, no result. He fired, after having moved to here, he fired back at them. There were actually, of course, 2 turns that you haven't seen, but in the end of the second one, he fired at them and managed to break the leader. It's just a leader and a squad in there, but just the leader's broken. Most significantly, what happened down here was the Germans here have slowly been rallying, and they now have all their troops in good order. The Russians considered a close combat attack on them up this way. Problem was, the worst shape they were in was having a good order leader and a good order squad, plus a medium machine gun, plus a light machine gun. So it was a lot of stuff for them to withstand at point blank range here. So they decided not to do that. They just stayed pat. Down here, the Russians that were here were in a very bad situation. I think they were here. So they had to make their way down here. They ran across the road, which was definitely a forlorn hope. They did make it across the road. They broke. And unfortunately what happened was they were trying to get out of the line of fire. So they ended up in this hex here. There were 2 squads and a leader all broken in there. And unfortunately that meant that all the German had to do was take a squad and go down to here, because from there there's nowhere for them to rout. So if they're broken and they have an enemy unit adjacent to them, they have to rout, but they can't rout to there, or there. So they were, of course, eliminated. So really it all hangs now on when the Russian reinforcements are going to show up, which, as I've said, they can enter anywhere here along the south edge of the board, and if they show up soon, of course, if these Germans are like here and here are somewhat exposed, the incoming Russian reinforcements might pounce on them right away. Try to do that as long as they were out of the line of sight of a kill stack like this one. And at the moment, the German player has he's got turn 4, 5, and 6 to play. He moves first, so it means that if he's going to control the buildings, he will have to accomplish that before the Russian player's last turn, so the Russian player will go last, so he might be able to rescue back a building that the Germans have taken. At the moment then, I suppose the Germans have controlled this building because they were the last ones in it. This building has been in dispute for most of the game, and this building over here is now in dispute. Remember, the Germans have to control the buildings, so the Germans have to get rid of those from there, get them out of there, and they also have to get these out of here and make sure that they won't be able to come back. The Russians will not be able to come back to these buildings on the last turn of the game. That's it for now. It's all good stuff, and I'll update you later. Okay, back in Stalingrad then, for the War of the Rats. We can see at the beginning of turn 5, so the Germans now have 2 turns left. And the victory conditions say the Germans win at the game end if they control the 3 key buildings. And if I can get a pointer of some kind, the 3 key buildings are this building here, and this big building here, and this building across the street. The Germans were the last to hold this building, so at the moment it's under their control. But as we can see, the Russians are about to kick in the door. The Germans came down from this direction, as you'll know from our earlier videos and photographs, and they took this building and then they went across the street into here, so that they had massive force in here to clear out this building. This building until last turn was occupied and had been occupied the whole for the whole of the engagement so far by these units down here, who are basically just staying out of the way and just saying, look, we're still here. And as long as they're there, denying the Germans control of the building, that means that the Russians will win the scenario. And that's what the Russians are doing. Sensibly, they're playing the scenario to win. So all they have to do is stop the Germans from having complete control of 3 buildings. Now, the other thing that just happened in turn 4 was that the Russian reinforcements finally showed up. And they came on here. And there was a single German unit here that was down here watching out for possible enemy reinforcements coming on from the south here. But the Russians came on at this hex here. I also thought I would pull the Russians out of this building and have them come down here, so that Russians from here and from here could both do a massive point-blank fire on the Germans that were here. The Germans that were there went through all kinds of step reductions and so forth, and eventually were completely destroyed. So now, as the last action, what the Russians boldly did was they did an advance phase move into 4 different hexes. They came from here into here, from here into here, and then the reinforcements went into here, into here. The reason they did this is so that I didn't just take the reinforcements in one big lump that the Germans could shoot at, because I believe this hex here is in the line of sight of that hex there. So we spread them out, and so this looks like a big stack here, but 2 of those are demolition charges. So there are actually only 2 squads in there, and no light machine guns. So there are only 2 squads firing there, and down here they have a range of 4, so down here these chaps are even at long range. So they can't do some sort of devastating fire into one hex and bag the reinforcements. Anyway, the Russian general premise down here is now going to be to try and move up into this building here and deny the Germans from having sole occupancy. The German, of course, is going to try to, I would imagine, move these forces down here so as to be able to take advancing fire shots at the Russians, who are, they're in the street. They're not moving in the open. It's not FFNAM or FNAM and FMO, but they should be able to get off some good shots. But also they need to do something about this building, because to win, of course, they've got 2 turns left. They've got 2 moves left. So to win, they've got to completely stop the Russians from occupying this building. So we shall see. Thank you. just finished playing my first scenario of Advanced Squad Leader, ASL Scenario S2, The War of the Rats, and the Russians have won. They have prevented the Germans from controlling the 3 buildings that they were assigned to control. We can see that down here the Germans finally cleared the Russian conscripts. There were 3 conscript squads with a halfway decent leader and 8 -1 leader down here, and they had a few bashes at that, and they eventually were able to do quite a devastating prep fire on them. It was quite lucky, to be honest, and then they did a close combat, and they caused them actually to rout to here, and well, here they are down here at the end of the game. So they're still alive, but it's only 2 half squads left there in very bad shape. Anyway, so the Germans control that building. Over here was where the Germans had most of their strength. They had this. They had a stack here which had 2 demolition charges and a flamethrower. Flamethrower malfunctioned right at the start of the engagement, so that was no longer an issue. They did use their 2 demo charges in the end. They were stationed here, and they put a demo charge here on this lot, and they were very lucky to be able to get a squad to put smoke in the street, to go into the street, and to put a demolition charge on this lot here. The effect of the demo charge on this lot here was almost nothing, and the effect of the demolition charge here was to cause the Russian forces that were there to rout to here and take losses. The squad that had placed the charge then subsequently moved into this building. But of course, in terms of the whole scenario, it means that this building here is clearly not in German hands. This is the stack of the reinforcements, basically, so it's a pretty spiffy Russian stack with 3 5.27s, as you can see, a 9.2 leader, and also a light machine gun. So they're completely undamaged. And this central building here has been fought over quite a fair bit. There's a big stack here of 3 broken German units. The German player unwisely left his one of his good leaders in a very vulnerable position. He was just by himself in a hex with a medium machine gun, so he didn't last very long. And so they've got a big stack of broken units here, unrallied. So as we can see, the Germans then control this building. They controlled this building for some time, and then the Russians took it back, and then this building was heavily contested. The very last move of the game was this weak Russian leader here. This corporal moved from here to here just to add insult to injury by being in this building. It wasn't necessary because no, I suppose it was necessary because otherwise the Germans could have claimed to have controlled this building as being the last people to have an unbroken unit in it. But now they clearly don't. So the Russians actually control 2 buildings, and the Germans control 1. In terms of anything particularly significant that was learnt from playing this scenario, again, it was my basic theory of you have to, if the enemy has got overwhelming firepower, you have to stay back and hide within the building that he's going to try to attack. You cannot be sort of sitting looking out the window at him as he tries to cross the street, because if he's got enough firepower, he will kill you right there where you're sitting in the building. So you need to hang back within the building so that you will hit him with point blank fire before he ever gets a chance to shoot at you. In other words, he will move and you will shoot at him with point blank fire before he's ever had a chance to shoot at you. We also learned that clearly flamethrowers can amount to nothing if you roll their breakdown number on their first shot. And if anything else pops into my head, I'll be sure and let you know. It was all good fun, played it over several days, and I don't think I really made any major mistakes. Oh, well, there are some new things, I suppose, that one should remark on that are different from Squad Leader. Of course, there are many things, but the things that stuck out is that light machine guns are no longer used in close combat. I can't remember in close combat in Squad Leader, they were either used in attack or defense, one of the two. But in ASL, support weapons are not used in close combat, so that's one thing. Also, I probably got this slightly wrong. Well, actually, no, I didn't get it wrong, but what happened was the squad that came from here put smoke in here, and there were Russians defending there. They fired, didn't stop him, and he put his demo charge there. Now, I didn't realize this, but if infantry use smoke grenades, the smoke grenades are removed, the effect or the smoke produced by them is removed at the end of the movement phase. That means that if the unit is fired on in the movement phase while they're moving through the hex, then of course the smoke will be in effect. But the whole point is here apparently is to represent that the smoke is very short-lived. So if the unit, as was the case with the German unit ended up here, couldn't move any further. So if the Russian had instead waited until the end of the movement phase, then the smoke would have been removed, and then the Russians, defending Russians, could, in the defensive fire phase, not the movement phase, could have fired on that hex, and there would have been no smoke there. So that's a very important point. I'm pretty sure that in Squad Leader, a smoke counter lasted at least one player turn or something like that. So very short-lived. Handy, but very short-lived. Let's see, I'm just trying to think of other things where it was clear that it was different to Squad Leader. Not so sure I can think of anything else for now. So I've just taken delivery yesterday also of the Avalon Hill version of the 1985 Advanced Squad Leader rules, which I found on eBay. So I'm about to start digging into those, and I'm looking forward to playing a ASL scenario that has some, yes, you guessed it, some vehicles and guns coming soon. And with that, I will bid you a fond adieu.